Good morning. That's not a good start, is it? Good morning. How the devil are you doing this Monday? Going to say quick good morning to Jim Turner, who just arrived. But when I'd finished pressing everybody else's buttons, he showed up. Good morning, Jim. Good morning, Jim Bergen over on Instagram as well, and D Direct Logistics over on Instagram as well. Mark Fitz is over there as well. Lots and lots of people. Pleasantly surprised yesterday. Obviously, been talking about migration and immigration. Was expecting a bit of a backlash. Didn't get it. In actual fact, got some very nice messages supporting all what I'd said. So thank you for that. Yeah. And there's been a lot of chat going on in the chat, should I say, way before the show started between Andy Darvell and Dan Cullen. Andy Darvell spent part of yesterday playing around on a tractor, a Fendt tractor. I know nothing about tractors. They always look far too complicated to me. I'm actually mentioned in the chat. Having watched Clarkson's Farm, there is no way I could get in a tractor and actually drive it. It's too many buttons, too many switches and things to remember. I mean, I've got this on my desk. It's got about a dozen buttons. That's enough for me. Can't manage any more than that. Yeah, it's a funny old show today. Yeah, we're going to start fairly light-hearted, and we're going to get more and more serious as we go along. So, hope you can stick around for that. So, should we crack on? I think we probably should. I think most of the people that we normally expect to be here are here. So, I'm going to roll the intro, post the question of the day, and get this show on the road. Strangest thing, I've just had a notification both on my phone and on my watch to tell me that this show has started. We've been going for 4 minutes and it's telling me the show has started. I'm going to say good morning to Khalid Farmi over on Facebook. Can't see the name of the company. It's partly obscured by the Facebook logo. But good morning to you. Where are you watching from? Love to hear from you. It is Wednesday, the 10th of September. Welcome to the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Mark Anthony, the Walrus of Demolition, the Lord High Chancellor of live streaming. And in today's show, is this the biggest wheeldozer in the world? And it's an open question because I don't actually know the answer to it. We'll have a chat about it when we get there. Wacker demonstrates its best zero emissions machines, and there's lots of them. Shearcore is ready for a scrap, which will make perfect sense when we get there. Plus, in my morning monologue today, surely by now we're beyond awareness. And I forgot to mention, Volvo equipment as a service. Is this the future? We'll come to that. Jim Turner, on the subject of tractors, says, I've got plenty of nice simple tractors for you to have a play on. So basic they haven't even got a cab on. Yeah, see, that's too basic. I do like my home comforts. Just not too many buttons and switches. That would be me. Yes, should we crack on? I think we should. I posted the question of that? I have. I am going to remind you of it very quickly. Yeah, they're partly confession time. This question of the day today is: have you ever tried to dress like someone else? So back in 1981, I checked. Back in 1981, I was 16 years old, and I'd just seen David Bowie doing a thing, and he was wearing a t-shirt, these huge baggy trousers, and basically what looked a bit like slippers. Hunted high and low, I did. Hunted high and low. So I ended up getting a pair of trousers just like his at a shop in Carnaby Street in London. And then I found a pair of Kung Fu slippers, actual Kung Fu slippers, in a shop just off Shaftesbury Avenue, again, just up the road from Carnaby Street. I went home, put them on, and in the mirror, as far as I was concerned, I looked just like David Bowie, which is no bad thing. And then my dad saw it. said I looked like a genie. That look didn't last, I have to say. And then one other time, and it was a strange time, the 80s. So me and my mate Bruce, sadly no longer with us, but me and my mate Bruce used to go up to Oxford Street and Regent Street on a fairly regular basis, shopping trips. You get paid and got to go and look hip and groovy for the next evening in a nightclub or whatever it might be. So we took ourselves off to Regent Street and Oxford Street, and walking around a shop, and I found this pair of grey pinstripe trousers, quite baggy. This was the 80s, so quite baggy, and I found a grey shirt that went with them. Lo and behold, I turn around and my mate Bruce is stood there holding precisely the same outfit, only his was burgundy. So we looked at each other and went, should we? Should we? So we shopped a little bit further and we found a pair of grey shoes that matched mine and a pair of burgundy shoes that matched his. So we basically we were twins. We bought identical outfits. And that night we went out dressed absolutely identically, me in grey, him in burgundy. With hindsight, we probably looked a bit strange, possibly a little bit gay. Nobody batted an eyelid. In fact, one of our mates said, "Are you two wearing the same outfit?" And we went, "Yeah." And he went, "Oh, cool." The 80s was a different time. Yeah. Have you ever tried to dress like anyone else? Let's have a look. Chris Ford is here, says, morning chances. Are we pulling the levers in the right direction? Who the hell knows? I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not even sure I know which direction is the right one. Question: is the UK buying products abroad for this zero carbon emissions reduction? An interesting one. 30% plus of cement and concrete products are imported. This is true. We were talking about this just the other day. Yeah, it and it has to get here. It has to get here. By ship and by lorry and stuff like that. Yeah, has that actually cured our carbon footprint, or do we smartly start to measure carbon footprint only when when it's actually on UK shores? Up until then, it was just, well, it had no carbon footprint because it wasn't here. We couldn't measure it in the middle of the ocean. I wonder. Dan Cullen said this is a thing to ponder. You're absolutely right. Are we actually going green and adding to other countries' emissions? Well, on the basis that we regularly send our waste and refuse to other countries, yeah, yeah, we are. Bet you looked the right pair of Zooms. With hindsight, in my head, we looked amazing. We basically looked like an undiscovered Wham. We were the very epitome of cool. In my heart, I will accept we probably looked very, very silly indeed. Would I do it again now? No, I would not. So shall we? Yeah, anybody has ever tried to dress like somebody else, I'd love to hear from you. We've got loads of stuff, and the first one is as I say, it's an open-ended question. We'll be back in just a moment. Yeah, my wife has just joined the chat. Morning, Ruth. And she was absolutely right about this. Does anyone remember? You need to be of a certain age for this. There was a big trend, certainly down in my part of the world, South London and Surrey and stuff. For they were kind of knitted t-shirts and knitted jumpers with the brand Gabici. Does anyone remember Gabicis? Well, it turns out, they became very, very fashionable, and they were at the same time that Farrah trousers became very fashionable. And what was the best place to get your Farrah trousers and your Gabici jumpers? From your granddad. Yes, they already had them. Yeah, I remember knocking up my granddad and saying, that jumper, you don't want that anymore, do you? No, absolutely. Peter McKenna says, morning all. I'm now a published songwriter. Well, I didn't see that coming. Of all the left field messages we've ever had here, that one is truly out of left field. Peter, what the hell are you talking about? I am going to be showing you a song fairly soon. That I was going to say I helped film the video for. Hindered, actually. Turns out I was in the video rather more than I should have been, bearing in mind I was just the cameraman. That's a whole other story. But you're a published songwriter. How did that come about? Where do we find the song? What the hell are you talking about? Dan Cunt says, Chris, probably levers, not sure correctly, but at least not left-handedly. Good to hear. Nigel Williams has joined the fray. Morning, Nigel. Are you feeling pumped? Have you been to the gym? I don't know the words. I don't do any of that sort of stuff. Dan Cullen says, no, never try to look like anyone else. Always like to be different. Well, Dan, I've met you. You're doing well on that. Peter McKenna, excuse me, says, I used to dress as a cowboy when I was younger. You're in the right part of the business then. Plenty of those about. Jim Turner says, all we're doing is making our country poorer. It's all part of the eroding of Britain and its society. When it's sunk enough, then the money will stroll in and buy most of us up. There you are. Dan Cullen saying, Peter, what? Really? Yeah. I've posted a song on the group, but it's live for sale on all platforms. Live for sale on all platforms. Peter, I'll look at the link in just a moment if I get a chance. Gary Muirhead says, question of the day. He was into kickers boots and Benetton jumpers. Oh, see, kickers had a pair, never a huge fan. Never. I know my other half used to go through kickers on a fairly regular basis, but Benetton jumpers, yes, absolutely. Had a really, really fetching pink one. It's quite itchy. Had to wear a t-shirt underneath it, but very, very smart indeed. And there's Dan saying good morning to all of the gang. Good stuff. Right, okay. So there I was yesterday browsing the interwebs, and I came across a video from the fine folks at XCMG, and they claim that the machine I'm about to show you is the biggest wheeled dozer in the world. It may be. It may be. This may be an accident. They've basically shared all of the specifications of the machine, except its weight. Now, I know Caterpillar have got a wheel dozer that weighs in about 110 tons. I can't remember the name of it, but they've got a bit. This one may well be as big, but they don't say how heavy it is. They mention horsepowers and stuff like that, which is fine, but that's not actually a measure of it being the biggest. Anyway, all that aside, XCMG have what might be the world's biggest wheel dozer, and I'm delighted to share it with you right now. Whether it's the biggest or not, I love it. Absolutely love it. Fantastic looking machine. Dan Cullen, have you ever tried to dress like anyone else? Well, Jim Turner says, no, I just dress in my own way. Jim, I've seen you up close. You're dead right, you do. I loved my wellies when I was younger. Only time I wore shoes or runners was when I was going out. Remember being at Glastonbury, 2008, first time I went with my youngest daughter, and we were sat there watching a band. And this being Glastonbury, the clothing is a little strange. My eldest daughter, who was about 14 at the time, was stood there. She had a band t-shirt on. She had a tutu, like a ballet tutu, and a pair of green wellies. And a little girl walked past, basically wearing the same outfit. Yeah. Well done, Courtney. Fantastic. Nigel Williams says, known Jim for a few days. Hurt my back and it's still sore, but I'm most certainly pumped. Out repping for the company today and visiting sites and quarries around Links and South Yorkshire. Nice part of the world. Lovely stuff. Andy Thornton, I'm glad you're here today, Andy, because you might want to you might want to pile in on our morning monologue today. It's very much in your ballpark, in your wheelhouse, should I say. Andy Dalvell says, now, I'll tell you what he says, and then I have a suggestion for us all. Question of the day. I act in my local pantomime. I was the Beast in Beauty and the Beast. And Andy, I've met you. No Beast. Surely somebody should be writing a Prince Charming part for you. Handsome man that you are. Anyway, great fun dressing in all that splendor. It's Peter Pan this year, and I've had a quiet nod that I'll be in green tights. Okay, so there is a possibility that our good friend Andy Dalvell will be on stage wearing green tights. I have a suggestion, people. Why don't we have an evening out at the Panto? Andy, where is that? Where is this taking place? Can we come? No, never mind. Can we come? We want to come and see you. Where is this taking place and when? I fancy a bit of that. I want to see you doing. I can't do the thigh slapping because I'm sat down, but I want to see a bit of that. Wow, nice. But go back to the bulldozer. What about punctures? Yeah, that I know. When I used to write about the Caterpillar wheel dozers, they were used almost exclusively on coal. Not a huge, a bit of coal, a bit of tire wear, not a huge problem with punctures. Let's have a look. That's a Cat 995 with a blade, not far off. Andy Darvell says all I see in that video is wheel slippage. It's Tracks are better for the pushing, aren't they? They really are. Ken Hatteras here. Good morning, Ken. And he was, you do this a lot, Ken. He was actually watching yesterday's show. Did it look familiar? Did you think he's worn that hat before? That's always the clue. With Dan's profile picture, you would envisage Dan dressed for the Arctic in summer. Yes, you would. I'll show it to you. It's not particularly big. Let's have a look. There you are. Blue sky in the background, and he's dressed for the Arctic. Let's have a look. Dan, also on the Panto. I'll buy the first ticket. Yes, you should definitely come. It's in Margate near Dunstable. Dunstable spent many a. I was about to say I spent many a happy hour in Dunstable. I spent many a happy evening in Dunstable. It used to be the hangout for the old SED exhibition. I wish I could remember the name of the hotel in the middle of Dunstable. We always used to stay in the same one, all of the people from Contract Journal and Plant Managers Journal. And then we'd go along to the Dunstable. I think it was probably the town hall to see the lighthouse lovelies. That was a thing. Yes, Andy. He's behind you. Yes, very good. Andy Thornton says we should all turn up in green tights. We should, but trust me. Trust me, nobody wants to see me in tights of any colour. They really don't. Andy Dalvell says, I was wearing a mask for the Beast to hide my beautiful face. Well, yes. I mean, you couldn't have done it without a mask. As I say, I've seen you up close. It's only up the road from me, Andy. There you are. See, there's you've got at least one person coming. I think we should make a night of it. And Andy Pan. Yeah, Andy Pan. Doesn't sound right. Doesn't trip off the tongue, does it? Anyway, loads of stuff still to get through. We're going to be back after a very quick word from our little known show sponsor. Yeah, thanks for that, Caterpillar. We're going to be talking zero emissions machines right now. Not just one, not just two, but lots and lots. And they're all from the same company. The company is Wacker Neuson. Great tune, great kit, great company, Wacker Neuson. Thank you very much indeed for that. Awesome stuff. Peter McKenna says, I've just seen my wife's ideal Christmas present. Thanks for sharing, Mark. Peter, if you're talking about the thing, what I think you're talking about, make sure you wash the concrete off it first. I'm just saying. Chris Ford says, he once dressed as Fred Flintstone. Looked ridiculous. Is there photographic evidence of that? Chris, we'd like to see that. The more ridiculous, the better. We already had, where is it? Where's Andy? He's behind you. And then we've had this one back from Chris Ford. Gary Muir. Oh, no, he isn't. Bit like the lorry's turning up to be loaded when I'm trying to have a break. Yeah. Behind you. Picture this. Wacker Neuson sex toy catalogue. I'd rather not picture that, if I'm being completely honest. Although any company that makes vibrators and pokers and rammers, you're kind of asking for it, people. Could we not have come up with better names? Could we not? Anyway, we've got more to come. Yeah, we're talking proper attachments in just a moment, immediately after this.
If you are enjoying this episode, please consider supporting the show. You can leave us a tip at buymeacoffee.com/demolition news.
Yeah, anyone fancy a scrap? Good.
Today we're in Odessa, Texas at our family's recycling facility, Grimes Iron and Metal. I am Nina Grimes. I do trading, buying, operations manager, you name it. We have been here since 1984. We average about 30 employees, and we have material handlers, mobile shears, 2 balers. We have multiple trucks, grapples, magnets, copper shears, you name it. If it's metal, we buy it. Non-ferrous, ferrous, it doesn't matter. If we don't know what it is, we're definitely going to reach out and find out what it is because we're going to buy it. We process and handle just about everything.
So this is where we start. This is our big scale. Most of our iron, tin metal, most of that stuff will come through here. If there's a lot of heavy non-ferrous stuff, batteries, if it's a big order, they'll come across here and come over here, and then we'll go around to this side for the non-ferrous material. But most of our material will go straight to the back to where we do all of our processing stuff. We have about 60 customers a day come through, and that's from little guys to big companies that will bring over 18-wheelers, or a guy that just got about 10 pounds of copper. They'll come through here all day. We got this new Cinnabogan back there my dad runs, and it pretty much does everything every machine does out here. You got the oil quick connect, so he comes out here, he can stay back there and do everything. He ain't got to worry about anybody helping him or anything like that. And he shears everything. Now I mean everything.
So I'm running a new Cinnabogan 835 with the versatile tool shear on it. Got the oil quick system with the quick connect to go to a grapple and a quick connect to go to a magnet. This machine will do multiple things. You can shear, unhook the shear, and hook up the grapple, and pick up the big stuff, then hook up the magnet with the oil quick. It's a quick connection. You don't even have to get out of the cab to hook up any of the magnets or the controllers. I haven't never timed myself, but I could probably unhook the shear and hook the grapple up in about 4 minutes, and then unhook the grapple and hook the magnet up probably about 3 minutes. You can work in one area with one operator and one machine without having somebody to bring another piece of equipment down and move something for you. So it's very versatile. This is the first new Cinnabogan that I have ever bought. So far, I am very pleased with the purchase.
With the way it's set up, you can literally do everything with that one machine. He can shear it, switch to the grapple, pick it up, then switch to the magnet. So that means one guy's doing that without even leaving the cab. That's way better because most of my guys are always busy doing something. So if I have to pull them off to go down there to pick up long iron or over there, that means they're stopping working over here. So everything's getting delayed. With that machine, it just makes everything run so much smoother.
And that right there is precisely why Oil Quick, as Nigel Williams has rightly said, is mint. It is mint indeed. Absolute game changer. That's an expression we use in this industry quite a bit, game changer. I think Oil Quick is absolutely one of those. Takashi 2057, back again. Good morning to you, my friend. How are you? That's over on Instagram. Peter McKenna says, I hope I look that good at his age. I must admit, I was doing something else. How old was he? He looked in pretty good nick, though, I have to say. What have we got? We've got one more film for you. Maybe it'll throw up a question or two. I'll be back after that.
Since the finance bill came into effect in April, the construction industry has seen a surge of fuel thefts. The rising cost of living has placed an additional risk of theft by employees and contractors, as well as opportunistic thieves. By using diesel dye and placing warnings of its use, you are sending a clear message that this is your fuel.
I saw you shared this on the WhatsApp group the other day, Dan. He sounds like the guy who says, what we got here is failure to communicate. Yeah, from the movie Cool Hand Luke, one of my favourite movies. One of my favourite actors, Paul Newman. Absolutely fantastic. Now, if you're a person of a certain age, you might remember back in the day, if you had a computer and you wanted some software for it, so Windows 95, you basically went out and you bought yourself a CD. You shoved the CD in, you loaded that software, and then a bit later on, when they came out with Windows 98, you had to go and get yourself another CD and plug that in your machine. All of that has gone. We now have what they refer to as SaaS, SaaS, or Software as a Service, SaaS. Okay, so you basically buy a subscription. And your machine, I mean, I've got it on, I'm running a Mac here, so I don't know which version of Mac I'm running, but about once every 2-3 weeks, it updates in the background. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to buy anything because I'm paying a regular subscription and I get my business updated. That is now an option for equipment. I'll tell you more, or we can talk about it more, but let me show this to you. I have to admit, this is kind of agricultural side of things, which is not normally what I would play, but it makes perfect sense. Have a look at this, and then we'll have a natter.
Most of our equipment needs are loaders. So cows are fed twice a day. The feeding activities, 14 to 16 hours a day. They're heavily used, generally 2,500 to 3,000 hours a year.
These things just run. They're great for us. You get in them, they do the job every single day. You don't have to worry about it. For us out here, dealing with the animals, animals come first. So obviously equipment needs to run, and these do a great job for us.
We've gotten away from owning a lot of our own loaders. The cost, again, the cost and the maintenance and the procurement, and Volvo's done for us what we need to have done in maintaining our equipment and keeping our equipment going. So it's made our business easier.
So Volvo Equipment as a Service, it's a fleet-based, long-term service that we provide to customers where they don't have to own the equipment. They just sign up for a block of hours. They say they're going to use the machine so many hours, and we supply the fleet to them with everything included, and they pay for the hours as they use them.
Betancourt is able to focus on their primary model. They're able to ensure that they're able to produce milk. They don't have to follow the machines, maintain the machines, because they've let that piece go to Volvo.
And the program takes care of the maintenance on the machines, any necessary repairs, reporting for events for the operator, as well as any downtime events would be logged.
Arnold Machinery has been offering the Equipment as a Service program going on 2 years. We now have 2 other large fleets utilizing the Equipment as a Service program.
And in the Volvo Equipment as a Service contract, we'll give the customer an uptime guarantee where we'll guarantee the machines are available X% in a given year. And if we fail on that guarantee, we'll actually pay them a penalty because we want to be measured on our performance.
It eliminates unknown repair costs, unknown maintenance costs, things like that. So yeah, definitely as machines become more complicated, as emission systems become more complicated, it kind of takes that burden off of the customer. So yeah, I definitely see it becoming more popular.
Until recently, the equipment as a service didn't have a lot of exposure to the agricultural industry, and this has really been able to open up our eyes to a completely different segment.
Started with a few loaders, maybe 10, and worked out great, and we just eventually replaced all the other units that we had, and now we're probably 95% Volvo, and we'll be 100 here pretty quick. So
things are working. You know, when you find something out here, maybe not only on the dairy farms, but just in general, when you find something that works, there's no sense in changing it. So very hopeful for the future.
My role in Betancourt's equipment as a service agreement is to maximize their uptime and their fleet production.
nobody's offered us something like this, and the ease of doing business with Arnold and Volvo together has been great. So I don't see us bouncing around anymore.
Yeah, so a couple of questions. First of all, not even a question. And Nigel Williams says, we already offer this to customers in your livery, your stickers, just pay monthly for it. Of all the times to be doing it, if you think about the current state of the UK economy and the wider economy as well, to have a predictable cost, I already know how much it's going to cost per month per machine. You factor in your fuel, but everything else is taken care of, your repair, your maintenance, and everything else. Zero downtime, because if it goes down, they'll give you a replacement or they'll fix it or whatever it might be. Makes perfect sense to me. And I do know, I mean, this has been something that has been offered very, very widely in the construction, in the quarrying and mining industry over the years. It has made inroads into construction. But I do wonder, is that the future rather than plant hire? If you've got a long-term project or you've got a fixed location that you are going to be running equipment all the time, is that not an option? Equipment as a service. Andy Thornton says, "Isn't this just lease rental with a service contract?" I mean, it kind of is. It kind of is. But I think one of the issues with things like lease rental is, they're often done through sort of finance companies, so there's an intermediary. I think if you're dealing direct with a manufacturer, things like replacement parts, they will be genuine replacement parts. They will come from the factory. They will be delivered by the dealer. They'll be installed by the dealer. I think it's going that a little bit further, which, to my mind is additional peace of mind. Could we see more of that? Could we see more of that in the future? Love to get your thoughts on it. Anyway, that pretty much wraps up the main part of this morning's show. I'm going to roll the outro in just a second before leaping gazelle-like over into my morning monologue, where we get a little bit more serious. If you can't stick around for that, please stay safe. Look after yourself, your family, your friends, and your colleagues. I hope to see you again very, very soon. But if you do have the time and the inclination, I'll be back in just a moment. But somebody's just popped something in the chat. What does that say? Chris Ford says, "Haven't Caterpillar been doing this for years?" They have. And I mean, listen, as Andy said, lease rentals and service contracts. Yes, they have. I get the impression, I think with the advent of telematics and remote monitoring of machines, I think we're entering a new phase. I'm sure Caterpillar are doing precisely the same thing. I would imagine the Komatsus and the Hitachis, everybody's doing the same thing. But that notion of equipment as a service, so, precisely why I said about the notion of software. If you go back a few years, you would basically update you'd go and get your new, in my case, a new CD, in your case, a new machine. Now you pay a subscription and it's updated in the background. You don't have to worry about keeping it up to date. It's done for you. And if you've got a problem with it, you can go back and you may even get a penalty payment back from the supplier. So yeah, it's an evolving thing, I would say. Morning monologue after this. Do you know what today is? Yes, it's a Wednesday. It's also the day before the 24th anniversary of 9/11. It's the birthday of golfer Arnold Palmer, of actor Colin Firth, and of Aerosmith guitarist Joe Perry. But beyond that, today is World Suicide Prevention Day. Now, in truth, the name of the day is a misnomer. There will be no prevention. No one will be confiscating handfuls of pills from those struggling with their mental health issues. None of us will be expected to talk our friends, family members, and colleagues down from a ledge. World Suicide Prevention Day is, first and foremost, a day to raise awareness. Now, of course, many companies in the demolition and construction industry will likely co-opt the day to shout about their commitment to mental health awareness. LinkedIn will be awash with virtue signalling about mental health first aiders and other such initiatives. Whether those claims will be matched by any genuine action, no one knows, though personally, I doubt it. So, as I said, this comes down purely to awareness. But my question is this: who in this industry needs greater awareness of an issue that is claiming the lives of more than 500 of our working men and women each year? Over the last decade, 7,000 construction workers have taken their own lives. In 2020, the suicide rate among construction workers was 3.7 times higher than the national average, according to the Office for National Statistics. A 2019 survey found that more than a quarter of construction professionals had considered suicide, and 56% worked for organisations with no mental health policy whatsoever. Mental health related absences cost the industry £2.7 billion a year, and nearly a third of self-employed workers report living with daily anxiety. And just to be clear, this isn't just a loose amalgam of numbers I've pulled out of my arse or plucked from the ether. I'm not disclosing some long hidden secrets here. These are facts that we know. In some cases, they're facts that we have known for years. And yet, here we are in 2025, and we're still talking about awareness. Not cures, not action, awareness. As an industry, we should be way beyond awareness at this point. We're not. But I'll tell you who is. The worker that saw his friend take his own life on site. The colleague sat opposite an empty seat in the site cabin. I'll tell you who else is beyond awareness. The wife who saw her husband leave for work, but never saw him come home again. The child that kissed their father goodbye, permanently. For an industry that can conjure a housing development out of thin air, that can make a tower block vanish in a matter of weeks, that lack of action is entirely at odds with the sector's balls to the wall, pedal to the metal reputation. Demolition and construction is an industry of action and of progress, yet not, it seems, when it comes to mental health awareness and suicide prevention. There are exceptions, of course, small islands of care, compassion, and empathy in a sea of apathy and inaction. The team at Construction Sport, for example, are fighting a noble and valiant battle at site level and using sport as a medium to get workers to open up to each other. But they're small. They lack funding to allow them to roll out their program on a wider basis. And so, at a time when the industry should be waging a war on the scourge of suicide, Construction Sport and others like them are fighting small, isolated battles. They're a guerrilla force facing down a much larger enemy, an enemy that has them outgunned, an enemy that continues to claim lives. Now, admirable though their efforts are, Construction Sport and their like shouldn't be necessary. Not in 2025, not in a modern professional industry sector. As an industry, we can point to our accomplishments: the new homes, the new hospitals, the railway lines, the airports, the office blocks. We can point to the billions in turnover, the millions in profit, in CEO salaries, in shareholder dividends, and in employees. But until we move from suicide awareness to actual suicide prevention, all of that will continue to be built upon the graves of those who take their all of that will continue to be built upon the graves of those that take their lives in service to this industry, fueled with the blood of workers ground beneath the wheels of an uncaring business. And for all its many achievements, suicide will remain an indelible stain upon this sector. I'll go wider in a moment, but and I'll get your thoughts on all of that. Suicide, World Suicide Prevention Day. I have a real issue with the word awareness. You probably gathered that. In the context of mental health and in the context of physical health, safety, health and safety. It's a bullshit word. I'm aware that scaffolding has a missing guardrail and somebody could fall to their death. I've done fuck all about it, but I am aware. I'm aware that there's an open manhole over there. I haven't put the cover back on it. I've done nothing about it, but I am aware. You ever drive past an abandoned or a crashed car by the side of the road, and somebody, I'm presuming somebody from the police force, has been out, covered it in blue and white tape that says "Police Aware"? If you're aware, move it. You've been walking through a supermarket and you see Malcolm from out the back come out with one of those little A-frames where somebody's dropped a bottle of milk or a carton of orange juice and the floor's wet and it's slippery. And rather than coming with a mop and bucket, he comes out with a little frame that says, wet floor, slippery, beware. Clear it up. Why make two trips? Why go out to the back of the shop, grab your little A-frame, come back, put it down, then go back, or possibly get somebody else, get on the phone, Dave, spill in aisle 5, Dave has to come out with his mop and bucket. Awareness. It's a bullshit word, and it doesn't do anything. So all of this nonsense about mental health awareness and mental health first aiders and all of that, I'm not having it. I'm not having it at all. 7,000 workers we've lost in the space of a decade. More than 500 in a year. More than one a day. For every day. If you talk about working days, it's more like 2 a day. And we're here again, World Suicide Prevention Day. I've already seen, I had a very, very quick look on LinkedIn this morning. I know the Lighthouse Club have put up one of their, their regular things about World Suicide Prevention Day. I'm aware. I've seen suicide up close twice. I'm aware. I've not prevented one. What do we have in yon chat? What do we got? Andy Thornton says, although suicide may remove the individual from pain, the individual pain they're in, it doesn't remove it. It distributes it to the only people the individual least wants to hurt: family, friends, and colleagues. Yeah. I had a long chat, as I said. I had a very long chat with Steve the other day. Steve Kerslake at Construction Sport. I've mentioned this before. My former business partner took his own life. Happily married, 6 children, and decided somewhere along the line he had got it in his head that they would be better off without him. At no point was that ever the case. I mean, there was no inkling of it. He was loving husband, loving father, dedicated to his wife, dedicated to his children. He was the main breadwinner. There was no suggestion that he was in any way any kind of burden on his family. And yet somewhere along the line, he had got that into his head, and he took his own life. And basically, when you think about it, I hate the notion of suicide being portrayed as selfish. But in that instance, I think it is. I need to end it all. They will be better without me. And has that ever been the case? Well, I guess it's probably not much. And again, there's always, whenever I talk about this as a problem within the industry, there's always somebody that says, 500 people killed themselves. They happen to work in construction. Are they actual construction suicides? No, not all of them. Not all of them. The thing that unites that 500 plus over a course of a year, they happened to work in construction. Was construction or demolition and construction, was that responsible for them taking their own life? Certainly not in every case. Certainly not. But when you think, and again, I mean, I don't want to get overly graphic because there might be sort of younger people listening to this. Speaking to Steve the other day, and he was telling me some of the stories, the horror stories that he hears. about people actually taking their, and this is not they happen to work in construction and they killed themselves. It's they've gone to work, they've gone to a site, and they have taken their own lives deliberately on site. And I'll tell you, again, not being overly graphic, but Steve had heard a report of a guy that had killed himself on a site. And he phoned up somebody who worked for the same company, basically to confirm if this was true or not. And the guy said, "Oh yeah, you mean the guy that hung himself?" And Steve went, "No, this was a different one." They'd had two within the same company in the space of a couple of weeks. That's more than a coincidence. It just is, and this isn't a case of, oh, Dave committed suicide. That looks like a laugh. I'll have a go at that. It's not that at all. Now, with my former business partner, he had been carrying around a suicide note for about 3 weeks. It took him that long to get around to it. But with some of these, if they're actually taking their own lives, jumping off buildings, cutting themselves, hanging themselves, whatever it might be, if they're doing that actually outside, surely you have to think that something has triggered them to do that right then, right there. Yes, they may have been struggling in the run up to it, almost certainly. I mean, even the worst of the worst days at work is not likely to push you over the edge from a standing start. So yes, they probably came to work that day with some baggage. Might be domestic issues, financial issues, or whatever it might be. But something has happened during their working day that has just made them go, "That's it." That was the clincher. That was the straw that broke this camel's back, and that's me done. I'm done. And I'll go back to the main core of that article or the monologue, and the notion of World Suicide Prevention Day. I can't say that an initiative to prevent suicides is anything other than noble and valiant and worthwhile. But what is it actually doing? As I said, it is World Suicide Prevention Day, but none of us, in all likelihood, are going to be knocking a handful of pills out of our best mate's hand to stop him taking his own life. In all likelihood, we will never have to, thankfully, never have to talk somebody down from a ledge. In order to prevent suicide within this industry, the industry needs to change. Clearly. I'm going to go back to, I don't think there's such a thing as construction suicide. There's suicide that happens on construction sites, but I don't think there's a job in construction that particularly brings suicide. Jim, you and I have had this discussion before. I think you're on one end of the argument, I'm on the other. As far as I'm concerned, there very much is a thing called construction suicide. There must come a point where you've gone beyond sheer coincidence. If the national average, and I don't know the national average, but if the national average of suicide was 1 in every 100,000 men, and those in demolition construction, it was 1.5 in every 100,000, you'd go, oh well, it's a slight glitch, I guess, but not. We're talking nearly 4 times the national average. That surely that is beyond coincidence. Andy Thornton says, unfortunately, this is not always company incompetence to deal with their staff problems. It's impotence to know what to do. We need to educate people what to look out for and do about it before it's too late. Part of and I'd be interested to get your thoughts on this, Andy, because obviously this is very much in your wheelhouse, as it were. one of the points that I was discussing with Steve over at Construction Sport with this was this is my own personal take, and trust me, I'm a journalist. I'm not a mental health expert. I believe this is not an issue that can be solved top down. I don't think there is enough importance given to it. You know, and in the nicest possible way, right? If you're on a site now, you know, and I know a lot of you guys are, you're on a site now, and one of your friends decides to take himself off and kill himself this morning, right now. You know, in all likelihood, you know, I'd like to think that your employer would say, "All right, lads, that'll do for today. Come back on Friday. Go, and we'll be talking about counselling and that kind of thing." But but by the time you go back to work, your mate will have been replaced. We know how the powers that be in the industry see the workforce as expendable. And ultimately, when you think about the multi-layered and the multi-tiered approach of demolition and construction, even if the managing director of a demolition or a construction company is an absolute passionate advocate for all things mental health, chances are they're spending zero time on site, or virtually zero time on site. So they've got to hope that the person that reports to them gets it reported by the person that reports to them. If somebody is struggling mentally on a demolition or construction site, it would have to go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 layers possibly of management before it lands on the desk of the managing director, and he says, "Oh shit, I better do something about that. Bob's struggling. I better go and have a word." The people that will see it first, unquestionably, are those that are working alongside. And there are obvious signs, there are less obvious signs. As I said in the past about my business partner, he was probably bipolar, I think. Never diagnosed, but he had no grey moods. He had black and he had white. He was up or he was down, and there was no point in between. But full well, if you've got a mate who is, he's the life and soul of the party, he's the one with all the banter, and then suddenly he isn't. Is that a problem? You've got a mate who, you say on a Friday afternoon, "Fancy a Swift half?" No, not for me, thanks. I'm not much of a drinker. And then one day he arrives and you can smell scotch on his breath. Is that a problem? None of that is going to be spotted by, directors and managers of companies. It's not going to be spotted by the Lighthouse Club. It's not going to be spotted by Construction Sport or any of these people. It's going to be spotted by the people that are working alongside them. Now, I personally don't believe that mental health first aiders are the answer. Again, I'm not an expert, but if I'm struggling mentally, do I want to confide in somebody that A, is a mate, somebody I work alongside, and B, is not actually a mental health professional? They're a digger driver who's been on a course for a couple of days. Are they my salvation? I'm thinking probably not. Andy says, "We're responsible for our own mental health, but when we're unable to do that, it's our closest colleagues who need to be there next. They're the ones who will see if they're down or two down or two up." Yeah, two up is another one. Yeah, we mentioned this about. I was talking about this pre-death surge. I was told by somebody about the notion of suicide, about the fact that somebody can get down and down and down, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, they seem better. That can also be a sign of all is not well, or all is about to get a whole lot worse. Jim Turner says there's definitely work-related suicide, probably a bigger average of business owners too. Yeah. Let's just take a step back. Let's just imagine suicide as a death. It's a death that has happened on a site. So if somebody falls off a building, gets crushed by a machine, that'll do. If fall off a building or crushed by a machine, there's an investigation. And the investigation says the reason this person has died is because that scaffold was faulty, or a guard had been taken out and he fell, or that machine shouldn't have been operating there, or that person shouldn't have been behind the machine and they've been crushed and been killed. There'd be an investigation, and there would be a learning opportunity from it. And we would all say, okay, well, we need to make sure in future the scaffolding is just like this, the machine and the men need to be just like this. We would know all of that, and we would learn from it, and hopefully we would not do that again. We don't do that with suicide. They will go down not as something on a Riddle report, not on something on an HSE report. They will go down as somebody that took their own life. Now, with something like, as I say, falling off a building, you can look at it and say, okay, well, not even a matter of who's to blame. Not talking about a point in blame here, but if you look at that scaffold, you say, oh yeah, look, that's where it went wrong. That wasn't bolted in properly, or that wasn't fixed, or they took that out of the way to put something in and they never put it back. You know that, and you know exactly what it is. With suicide, it's Bob killed himself. Now, as Jim has rightly said, and this bit I do agree with you entirely, Jim. He may have had, he may be going through a really unpleasant divorce. He might be about to lose access to his children. He might be facing eviction. There's a multitude of reasons that he might have been in that situation before he killed himself. But he might also have been under undue pressure and stress at work. The job may have been making him ridiculously anxious, but we don't know because we don't ask. And unless we ask, this notion of prevention, it's puff. Unless you can say the reason that guy killed himself was that, and we need to make sure that doesn't affect the rest of our workforce. Until you do that, you're not actually solving the problem. And all the mental health awareness posters, the mental health first aiders in the world, will not make a difference. Until you start to change, the procedures and the practices and the demands upon the individual workers, until that happens, the best that you can do is try to put in place a safety net. You're not taking people out of harm's way. You're just hoping you catch them when they fall. It's too late by then. Because if somebody is determined, and I go back to my former business partner, he was determined, they will find a way. Go back to this. Jim says everyone should be looking out for their mate's mental health. Yeah. Yeah. Do you know what I find strange? I mentioned this on the show a few months ago. My eldest son's best mate took his own life, 32 years old, earlier this year. Up until that point, my son, now bearing in mind, I've had my issues. My youngest son has had his issues as well. But my eldest son has literally mental health, depression, no time for it at all. I'm bearing in mind, he's 31, 32 years old. So he has come up in a generation where talk of mental health and mental health awareness and mental health issues has been around him for at least a decade. He's seen it up close. He's very aware. But up until his mate actually killed himself, depression, just somebody's got the ump, isn't it? Just dismissed it. Now, admittedly, after his mate took his own life, and I did share this on the show before, he actually said, my mate had, this good looking, athletic, loads of money and all the things, and he still decided that was the way forward. And if it could get him, it could get me. That was the first inkling that mental health was an issue. So as I say, we're a decade or more into being more open in our discussions, and yet the you'd have thought our woke snowflakey younger generation would have been all about that. We often hear about them playing the mental health card if things aren't going their way. Oh, I'm under too much stress. I need 6 months off, full paid. We always hear about that. The message ain't getting through. And in all of the instances, and I shared this with Steve Kerslake the other day, and this is a really strange one, I have to admit. I'd been through the ringer a bit. And listen, I had depression. At no point did I consider suicide. Too much of a coward. Too much to live for. Love my wife and my kids too much. Never came into my head. But I did go through a bad period. I went to a meeting, an industry meeting actually, and I bumped into somebody that he and I do not get along. We do not get along. We don't see eye to eye. We've never actually had a stand-up argument, but I think both of us are very aware of our feelings towards each other. But, you walk into a meeting. He was there as I was walking in. You do the polite thing. How you doing? And he did the thing. He shook my hand. How you doing? And I went, fine, hoping that would be the end of it and I'd move on. But he held on. Probably actually a little bit tighter. And he went, really? Seriously, how you doing? And I, as I say, this is not somebody that and maybe I'll come back to that. But I actually went, not great. Not great. Dad's very ill, lost my best mate. And we had about 15, 20 minutes and it turns out one of the reasons that he had asked in the way that he'd asked was that he'd lost somebody fairly close to him as well. So we had that in common. Now, to this very day, he and I do not get along, but that little interaction gave me permission to open up. Now, I've never really analysed it, but I wonder if I was happy to do that, partly because he gave me permission, but also because we didn't have anything. There is this weird notion, I think, with mental health. When I was going through mine, the last person I wanted to tell about it was my wife. She's my wife. I've known her since she was 16 years old. She's my best mate. I love her to death. I didn't want to burden her with my issues, so I didn't. I kept it to myself. And I wonder if there's a bit of that goes on. I know everyone always says, oh, men are, they're rubbish at sharing their emotions. I wonder if they can't share their emotions because of that reluctance to burden. I know, Jim's still in the chat here. Jim might be working beside somebody. They might be really close. And if that guy is struggling, is he going to go to Jim and say, Jim, I'm really, I'm really having a hard time at the moment. And, I know Jim always goes on about his tisms, but I'm sure there is empathy within and so on. But is that too much? Are you asking too much of a friend? Somebody that is actually a friend, or even a colleague? And yes, we might be able to spot when people are struggling one way or another, but are we ever going to actually go to somebody and burden them with our problems if we're that close? I didn't. Maybe I'm atypical, I don't know, but I didn't. Andy Thornton says it's not a pre-death surge, it's coming to terms with what they've decided to do, so it's no longer an inner turmoil. It's just an action to be planned and taken. That was very much my my business partner. What I found bizarre with him was he had clearly planned what he was planning to do, clearly planned what he was about to do. And yet he had booked meetings with people. We had an office manager, and he phoned her and said, "I'll be in on Monday. Can we do this, that? Can you have that ready? Because I need to do." He'd laid all of those things out, knowing full well that he had no intention whatsoever of actually doing any of those things. It's kind of a weird imbalance. I've planned, meticulous detail how I'm not going to be here anymore. At the same time, I'm planning what I'm going to do while it's a bit bizarre. Obviously, some take their own life in the moment. Many plan ahead. Yeah, well, as I say, my former business partner did precisely that. But those that do it in the moment, there will have been a trigger. It's not the sort of thing, you're not there on a site driving your excavator or banging nails into a bit of timber, and you think, a bit bored at the moment. I know what I'm going to do. Something will have happened that has gone and pushed you over the edge. What is that edge? And are we doing enough to make sure that we don't get our people to that edge? If your job is stressing someone out, they're either in the wrong job or working for the wrong type of company. Is there a right type of company in this business? Is there a demolition or construction company in the land that doesn't heap stress and anxiety on their workers? Has anyone ever turned up on a new site first day, and the site supervisor or the project manager says, we're building 15 homes. They're going to be this size, that's, this many bedrooms, this specification, they're doing this, you're doing that. What's the project deadline? When you get round to it. No rush. Anyone ever said that to you? Or do you arrive on day one and you're told, never mind cup of coffee in the morning, never mind pee break, never mind getting your PPE out your car, get in your machine, get to work, we're already running a month late. And from that point on a daily, sometimes an hourly basis, you will be whipped and you will be coshed and you will be badgered and you will be cajoled into working faster and faster and faster. They will be heaping stress upon stress upon stress. That's the norm in this industry. And the annoying thing is, for one thing, it's unnecessary, but for another, nobody ever gets a contract in demolition or construction by surprise. Hang on a minute. Somebody reckons I'm an AI. I just took my cap off. Not AI. Where was I going with this? I've lost my train of thought now. It completely buggered me up. Let's have a look at this. Andy says, there's two things here. Those close will recognise something's wrong, but they may not be the right person to talk to. A first aider may be the right person to talk to, but not recognise who needs them. It's a good point. The other point on that, Andy, Dan Cullen, Dan's probably gone back to work long ago by now, but he's been on sites with mental health first aiders. Never met one. Now, they may look at him at a distance and think, oh, look at Dan. He's like a pig in shit on this site. We're not going to bother with him. But he's literally never met one. Never met one. Thank you, Jim. You've just put me back on the train of thought that I was having. I'll show you what he said. You'll only be whipped and badgered if you accept that treatment. I don't accept people trying to lump their stress on me. Again, you're a veteran. You know your own mind. That's not the case for everyone. I was going to go back and say exactly what it was I was going on about just now. Yeah, I know what it was. We're gonna build a dozen houses on the site of that former school. I'm making this up as I go along. So we know that's coming. Okay, we've put it out to tender. We've been through the tenders and we've decided that Demolition Company X, Andy Thornton Demolition, is going to be doing the job. And then after that, Jim Turner Construction is going to come along and build that dozen houses that we need. We've agreed terms, we've agreed methods and everything else. Now, we could say to Andy Thornton Demolition, okay, Andy, over to you. We want to start building in about 2 months' time. Get that down, usual procedures as described in the RAMs and everything else. Crack on, keep us informed, knock yourself out. But what they actually do is they will sit on that job, and they will sit on that job, and they will sit on that job, and then they will say, right, okay, Andy, it's good to go on that demolition, but you know how you've allowed 6 weeks? Well, the demolition or the construction is due to start in 3, so we need it done in 3. And from that point forward, Andy and his team will be getting phone calls and site visits. Are you done yet? Are you done yet? Are you done yet? Are you done yet? Meanwhile, Jim is over in the background, twiddling his thumbs, waiting to get the nod. Andy finally gets himself out the way with his team. In comes Jim with his team, and they say, okay, 12 houses, to this specification, exactly as we've agreed, exactly as per the price, exactly as per the RAMs. We said we wanted them in 6 months. We need them in 3. Crack on, would you? And from that point on, Jim will be getting daily and hourly phone calls. Are you done yet? Are you done yet? Are you done yet? Not just housing. You think about roads, or more specifically bridges, because I think this is like the ultimate example of it. Imagine a company like Armac, the bridge busters at Armac. They're going to take down a bridge over a motorway. How long is it going to take? Well, we're going to need a weekend possession. So we take over that stretch of motorway at midnight on a Friday night. You will have it back operational by Monday morning. Now, they're called the bridge busters for a reason. It's well within their capabilities. They will get that down probably in 36 hours. They might even do it in 24, but they have to have a bit of wiggle room just in case something goes tits up. However, if something does go tits up, there is a mega penalty waiting for them. If they say that motorway below the bridge they're demolishing will be open for 6 o'clock on a Monday morning, and it's not open until 6:30, hundreds of thousands of pounds. Now, that will have been communicated to Noel and Adrian McLean at the top of Armac, who will have communicated it to their managers, who will have communicated that to the operators that are doing the work. So all the while, and again, I'm not using them as an example because they're bad. I'm using them as an example because they're really, really good. But we've got a window that big in which to do this job. Nothing whatsoever can go wrong. Now, again, going back to Armac being the professionals that they are, they'll double up on their equipment. They've got hose replacement people standing by the entire time they're on site. But what if something does go wrong? What if the bridge collapses in an uncontrolled way? So rather than taking it down in a controlled manner, it's now on the motorway. It's now got to be cut up and processed and everything else. And you've got everybody from the Highways England down through Balfour Beatty or whoever, heaping pressure upon pressure upon pressure. And pressure does flow downhill. Noel and Adrian at the top of Armac might get it in the neck, who will then give it in the neck to the person below them, who will, by the time it comes to the guy that's driving the digger on that, it is literally, it's not even cajoling, it's badgering. And all of that is stress. I get time is money, but project slippage with penalties is beating people whilst down. The best laid plans, yeah. Yeah. And seriously, okay, we've had a lot of work. I'm in just outside Epsom, sorry. So my usual route onto the M25 is via the A3. There's an A3 interchange up at Wisley. They'd been widening it for about 2 years. And there was a couple of bridges that needed to come down. So we had weekend possessions there, which meant there's been a couple of days over the course of a few years where if I wanted to go fishing at my favourite fishing spot, I'd have to do a bit of a round trip. Not the end of the world. Would it really be the end of the world if, rather than being closed for 2 days, that section was closed for 3? Would it? Would it be the end of the world? Think about. I'll use demolition as another example. We've had instances. The one on the job down at our Reading station, or the approach to Reading station a few years ago, where the scaffold collapsed and fell out into the road. Thankfully, nobody was hurt. The best way to have taken that building down was basically to close that road, close the footpath for a day, 2 days, a weekend, basically shove the entire building in on itself, knock it over like a deck of cards, reopen the road when there's no danger of anything falling, and then process it. But no. Instead of that, the local authorities say, oh, must keep the road open. Oh, must keep the footpath open. We must have lots of scaffold and, and if anything happens, no, that's not what scaffold's designed for. It won't prop up a building that's about to fall over. Clearly, demonstrably, it didn't, because the building ended up in the road. And that was all because lack of understanding, I guess, but because the local authority decided we must have that footpath open. There's not just one footpath that leads to Reading railway station. There's probably 15, but they refuse to do the sensible thing. So, pressure. It's only stress if you take the blame. You do, though. You do. If look, listen, maybe I take my things far too seriously. Every job I've ever had becomes my baby. Every episode of this show, I want it to be as good as it can be. Every time I worked on a magazine, I wanted that next issue to be as good as it could possibly be. Yes, some of that, not now, because I work for myself, but back in my magazine days, some of that was from on high, but a lot of it was self-inflicted. I wanted, if that magazine's going out with the name Mark Anthony under the banner, I want that magazine to be the absolute dog's doodah. And I don't honestly think that the people that are watching this show right now would be doing so if they weren't passionate about demolition or construction. You like that. What's the expression? You can't be half pregnant. If you are into diggers and construction and demolition and everything else, you'll take a day off to go to plant works. You'll take a day off to go to Hillhead. You'll set aside an hour in the morning to listen to this Burke rattling on about something or other. You are completely into it, and I think that's reflected in work. Dan Collins is a prime example, and I've just seen that Dan is actually here as well. A number of jobs he's been on where he's been despairing of the people he's been working alongside because Dan cares. So you end up, not only do you care about the job that you're doing, but you're then trying to plug the gaps that are left by those people that are not as caring as you are, that are not as committed, as dedicated. Or not challenge the blame openly. Dan says, I'm still here. No mental health on site here. There you are. There, proves the point. Proves the point. I mean, I think there was a statistic in that thing that I mentioned. Where is it? Can never find these things when you want it. 2019 survey. 56% of the people that were surveyed said they work for organisations with no mental health policy whatsoever. Dan is one of those. Andy Thornton says, Jim, if the stress is not paying the mortgage and losing your house, the blame sits with the individual, even if it's because a project went awry. Here is 2,000 houses on an old airfield. There's 25 to 30 men at the moment and rising, but no one asks, how are you all today? Yeah, any issues? No. No, I mean, I bet you've had your toolbox talks. I bet you've had your pre-start briefings. I bet you're being told, you need to grease your machine. I bet you're being told that you need to fuel your machine. I bet you're being told that you need to work a little bit harder and a little bit faster. Anybody checked on how you're doing? Nope. And as I say, this is 2025, and all of those things that I mentioned, 7,000 lost lives in a decade, 500 in a single year, 3.7 times the national average suicide rate, all those things, none of that is a surprise. None of that is out of left field. We know that. We've known it for years. We've sometimes known it for decades. 2025, there's Dan and 30 other blokes working on a site under pressure with no mental health support whatsoever. And Dan's site is not unique. Not unique in any. If anything, that's more like the norm rather than the exception. Now you know why I've got such an issue with the term awareness. 'Tis bullshit, I say. When you're confident you did everything possible to complete the task, then it leaves you stress-free, especially if you can see the real reason the project didn't work. I know where you're coming from, Jim, and I can't actually disagree with you. But again, go back to using Dan as an example. He's actually sent a message through WhatsApp, I think it was this morning, saying he was working with some clowns again. If you arrive on a job, you've got a job to do, you need to do this to get that done, and the people working around you are not pulling their weight, so you end up taking on some of their grief as well. And there is always that underlying feeling of I don't know, misplaced pride. Not your project, but you want it to be as good as it can possibly be. So you take on perhaps a little bit more than you can manage. And seeing that, your boss will tell you, actually, do that as well. There's a bit more stress for your morning coffee. Enjoy. Demolition and construction in 2025. How on earth? Wow, listen. We're still talking about health and safety awareness for slips, trips, falls, people being killed by working at height, asbestos, and we know all of the causes of accident fatalities. And yet, in 2025, we're still having those self-same conversations. Can I honestly expect the mental health thing to be resolved? I've got to be honest, hand on heart. Nope. Dan says, great monologue, Mark. Have a great day, guys. Dan, that's a perfect way to round things off because that is nearly an hour and a half of your time. Go and do your thing. Dan says, speak to you tomorrow. Countdown is near to the 1000th show. Yeah, we are show number 997 today. So 2 more this week, which will take us to 999, and then the big one on Monday. I hope you can join us for that. Until then, everybody, look after yourself. Look after yourself, your family, but also, given what the day is, have a word with your mates. Make sure they're okay. Give them my best. Let's make sure that the people that are on your site today are on your site tomorrow as well, and the day after. I will see you all very soon. Have a good day.
If you are enjoying this episode, please consider supporting the show. You can leave us a tip at buymeacoffee.com/demolition news.